Who raised you more? Your parents, your grandparents, or someone else?
My cousin Rachel turned 35 last Saturday, and I wasn't invited to her birthday party. Not because they forgot or it was some small intimate thing. No, it was a massive event. Black tie, rented ballroom, valet parking, even a goddamn cigar lounge on the patio for the gentlemen. There was nothing intimate or casual about it. Every member of our extended family was there, dressed to the nines, raising glasses, making speeches, posting stories with glittery filters and captions like, "So proud of my girl," and "Only the best for the best." Everyone, except me. The way I found out I wasn't invited wasn't even subtle. Aunt Linda, who always had a tongue dipped in perfume and poison, called me the week before to check in. That woman only calls to collect gossip or deliver judgment, and this time was no different. After a few empty pleasantries about how quiet I'd been lately, because apparently not posting on Facebook is equivalent to disappearing from existence, she dropped the line that would sit in my chest for the rest of the week. "Well," she said, her voice wrapped in honey and condescension, "Rachel's throwing a little birthday gathering. Just a few folks, nothing crazy, but we're keeping it to a certain kind of crowd. You know, people who've got their lives together. People doing big things. I mean, it's a night for winners, honey. You might feel a little out of place." I didn't say anything for a second. I just stared at the microwave clock, trying to process if I heard her right. And she must have sensed the silence wasn't a sign of agreement because she rushed in with that fake laugh cough she always uses when she's said something mean and wants to make it sound like a joke. "You know what I mean, sweetie. Don't take it the wrong way. Don't take it the wrong way." That's rich, coming from a woman who once told her sister that losing your job might be good for your humility. I hung up before I said something that would ruin the fragile family peace we all pretended existed. Then I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, and I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt this dull, slow burn move up from my stomach to the back of my neck. The kind of heat that tells you something's about to change. Or maybe should have changed a long time ago. To be clear, I wasn't unemployed or drifting aimlessly through life. I wasn't doing drugs or couch surfing or making excuses. I was building something. A startup. Something real. Something I'd poured every ounce of energy, time, and late-night panic into for the last 3 years. It wasn't glamorous. I wasn't some LinkedIn influencer posting about leadership paradigms. I was scraping together funding, talking to developers across time zones, pitching my ass off to investors who looked through me like I was a student selling cookies. I was exhausted, often broke, and barely had time to do laundry. But I was building something. And in our family, that didn't count, not unless it came with a 6-figure salary and a blue-check Instagram. So when Saturday rolled around, I stayed home like the non-winner they believed I was. I ordered frozen dumplings and watched 2 episodes of an old legal drama before curiosity got the better of me. I opened Instagram. First mistake. The party was already in full swing. Rachel was wearing a gold sequin dress with a plunging neckline that probably cost more than my rent. Uncle Joe was giving a toast with a cigar in one hand and his phone in the other, live streaming it like he was some sort of family royalty. My younger cousin, Chloe, had even hired a content creator to film the event. It looked like a damn wedding, not a birthday. And there, in the middle of it all, was Aunt Linda, laughing too loudly, leaning into the camera with a glass of champagne and declaring, "Tonight's for the winners," before the video cut to a slow-motion montage of Rachel twirling under a ceiling of fairy lights. I watched it 5 times. I didn't want to, but I did. I felt the shame crawling under my skin, even though I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. I hadn't failed. I hadn't quit. I had just dared to take a different path. One they didn't recognize, so they wrote me off. Out of sight, out of relevance. By midnight, I was sitting cross-legged on my living room rug, laptop open, refreshing the analytics dashboard for Pulsepin, my app. Numbers weren't moving much. The metrics were flat. My last pitch had been ghosted by a VC who loved to talk about elevating women in tech, but never actually returned a woman's call. I was tired. I wanted to quit. For maybe the 10th time that month, I actually considered pulling the plug. That's when I saw the message. It was on LinkedIn of all places. A short note from someone named Ruben Lennox. No profile photo. Barebones bio. Just the words, saw the Pulse pin pitch. You might want to turn on CNN tomorrow morning. Nice work. No follow-up. No links. No calendar invites. I almost dismissed it as spam. But something about it stuck with me. I didn't even remember submitting anything to CNN. Hell, I barely had the energy to keep our company site up to date, let alone attract national media attention. Still, I screenshotted the message, just in case. Then I closed the laptop, stared at the ceiling, and whispered to no one in particular, wouldn't that be something? I didn't sleep much. Not because I was excited, but because the thought of hope was too foreign. Hope had become this risky emotion I couldn't afford anymore. Every time I let myself hope, something disappointing followed. So I trained myself not to. But that night, lying there in the dark, I kept thinking about what Linda had said. A night for winners. What the hell does that even mean? Maybe tomorrow I'd finally find out. The morning light didn't creep in gently like it does in those peaceful, cinematic way-up scenes. They always lie about that. No, it stabbed through the blinds, hot and too bright for a July Sunday, and pulled me out of the shallow, twitchy kind of sleep you get when your body's still and your mind won't shut the hell up. I lay there for a minute, flat on my back, trying to remember if what I read the night before had actually happened or if my brain had whipped up some hopeful hallucination as a survival tactic. But the screenshot was still on my phone, and the message from that LinkedIn stranger, Ruben Lennox, the name that now felt more mythical than real, was still sitting there like a dare. I don't know what I expected when I turned on the television. Maybe a 30-second business segment buried under ads for prescription meds and real estate insurance, or maybe even nothing at all. Just silence and static and my own damn reflection in the black screen, mocking me. But what I saw instead was my company's name, big and clear, floating in the lower third graphic of CNN's morning tech segment, and above it, God help me, a video of me, talking with my hands too much. Hair pulled into that emergency ponytail I always swear I'll never wear again, standing on the red dot of a TEDx stage from 2 years ago, passionately rambling about user data and behavioral mapping like it was the second coming of sliced bread. At first, I thought it was some sort of cruel edit, a clip lifted out of context to mock startups that get too big for their own good, but then the anchor, some perfectly put-together woman with cheekbones like cliffs and a voice that could sell bad news as gospel, actually said my name. She said, Michelle Rayner, founder and CEO of Pulse Pin, has closed a surprising Series C deal this weekend that catapults her company into what analysts are calling the next unicorn to watch list. Sources indicate a valuation surpassing $1 billion, though terms remain confidential. And, just like that, the world tilted. Not in a magical, fairy tale spin kind of way, but in that dizzying, stomach-churning shift where everything you've believed about your place in the world, everything that made you question your worth for years, suddenly rearranges itself in one long, seismic lurch. My face was on CNN. My name was being read aloud. And the word unicorn wasn't just some buzzword on a tech blog, it was mine now. I sat there on the couch, blinking at the screen, not crying, not laughing, just suspended. Like someone had hit pause on the universe and forgot to press play again. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't pick up the phone and call my mother. I didn't text my brother or post some humble brag status to let the whole family know I was now the kind of person Aunt Linda might consider a winner. No, I sat there, hands still, dumpling container from the night before still on the coffee table, and I watched the segment again. Then again. I wasn't trying to memorize it, I just didn't trust it to still be there. At exactly 7 o'clock that morning, my phone rang, and when I saw the name flash across the screen, I knew something had cracked open. It was Grandma. Not my mother. Not my cousin. Not Linda. Grandma. And when I picked up, I didn't even get a full hello out before I heard her voice break through, soft and shaky, like she'd just come out of a storm. I saw you, she said, her voice thick with tears, the kind that come when your heart's too full and too proud and too overwhelmed to hold it all in. I saw you, baby girl. On the television. Your name. Your face. I sat here all morning waiting for it to be a mistake, but it wasn't. It's you. You did it. And just like that, the tears came not because of the segment or the valuation or even the absurdity of CNN finally spelling my name right, but because Grandma saw it. She saw it without needing an explanation or a press release or a social media caption. She saw it, and it mattered to her. She kept talking, her voice rising and falling in that way old women speak when they're too proud for words, but too full to stop. They didn't see it in you, Michelle. But I did. From the time you were 7 and you took apart the toaster because you wanted to make it cook faster, I saw it then. I never said anything because I didn't want you to feel pressure. But I saw it. I always saw it. It felt like forgiveness for a crime I hadn't even realized I was still carrying. For every time I'd tried to prove myself to people who didn't care. For every birthday party I hadn't been invited to. For every dinner where someone asked me when I was going to get a real job. For every sideways glance at Thanksgiving when I tried to explain what I did for a living. And yet, even in that moment of unexpected validation, I didn't reach for revenge. Not yet. I didn't text Linda. I didn't forward the video to the family group chat. I didn't upload a single thing to my own feed. I wanted to see what they would do without a push. I wanted to know whether they'd hear the thunder without me yelling into the clouds. So I waited. All Sunday. No calls. No messages. Not from Rachel, who was probably still sleeping off the champagne. Not from my mother, who likely hadn't even watched the news. Not from Linda, who was probably still busy patting herself on the back for raising such a successful daughter. But I knew it was only a matter of time. Because in families like mine, silence is currency. And suddenly, I was the one holding all of it. Later that evening, right as the sun dipped low enough to throw long shadows across the floor, I saw it, Linda's newest post on Facebook. A carousel of party photos. Gold lights, champagne towers, perfectly staged candids of people laughing with their mouths open, just enough to look carefree, but not ridiculous. And beneath it, a caption that read, "Last night was everything. Surrounded by beauty, grace, and success. A night for winners. Leave the rest to reality TV." The words hit like a match struck across dry wood. There it was again, this idea that some people deserved the spotlight and others were just noise. The part that killed me wasn't the exclusion anymore. It was how certain she was that I still belonged on the outside, even when the world had just flipped the script. It was her audacity. Her blindness. Her complete and utter faith that nothing in her hierarchy could ever change. And maybe that was the moment something in me shifted. Not from bitterness. Not from pettiness. But from something deeper. Something more dangerous. I didn't want an apology. I didn't even want acknowledgement. I wanted them to need me. Not because I asked for it, but because the ground they stood on would start to crumble without me. And when they came crawling back, as I knew they would, I wouldn't slam the door in their face. No, that would be too easy. I'd hold it open, just wide enough for them to walk through. And then I'd remind them exactly what kind of winner they left outside. For the next 2 days, I said nothing. I didn't share a single article, didn't repost the CNN clip, didn't drop any cryptic quotes about karma or success, didn't even log into Facebook, which, in my family, is practically a declaration of death or disownment. I didn't post, I didn't like, I didn't comment. I became a digital ghost, invisible to the same people who had always treated my silence as evidence of failure, as if keeping your head down meant you had nothing going for you. And during that entire stretch of time, 48 hours of deliberate quiet, the only person who reached out was Grandma, who sent me a photo of her and her bridge club holding up a hand-drawn sign that said, "We knew it." Like some kind of proud protest against the years I'd spent being overlooked. It wasn't until the morning of the 3rd day that the silence finally broke, and of course, it wasn't from the person I expected or dreaded most. It came from Rachel. At 7:34 in the morning, I received a text message so casual, so blissfully tone-deaf, that I actually laughed when I read it. "OMG, girl. Just saw CNN. Why didn't you tell anyone? We would have made you a VIP at the party." That last sentence stung more than I wanted it to. The idea that my value had to be proven before I could even earn a chair at the table, let alone a spot in the spotlight, was so deeply embedded in our family culture that Rachel probably didn't even hear herself. To her, it was a compliment, An invitation after the fact, a patch on the wound, a retroactive golden ticket that meant, now you're one of us. I didn't respond. I read it twice, let the notification sit on my screen like a challenge, and then I closed my phone and went back to reviewing a vendor contract that suddenly mattered a whole lot more than family reunions or backhanded congratulations. But by noon, the dam had burst. One by one, the messages trickled in. First from my older brother Mike, who had always acted like I was chasing a pipe dream, like startups were just fancy ways of avoiding real employment. He called and, without so much as a preamble, said, "Hey, just wanted to say congrats. I always knew you'd land something big eventually." Eventually. As if this was a matter of patience rather than persistence, as if I had simply waited long enough for a prize to fall in my lap. Then came the message from my mother, who hadn't reached out during the entire weekend and now wanted to clarify that she had been so busy with church activities and had just caught up on everything. She added a line about how proud she was and how Linda never meant any harm with the party guest list, as though Linda's exclusion of me had been an administrative error and not a calculated social maneuver. I didn't respond to her either. I didn't trust myself to say anything that wouldn't turn into a fight we'd never recover from. Besides, the calls weren't about me. Not really. They were about proximity, how close they could get to something shiny, something validated by national media. My win had become a family asset overnight, and now they were all rushing to reestablish their connections before it slipped through their fingers. It wasn't until later that evening, right as I was pouring a glass of wine I suddenly could afford without guilt, that Aunt Linda finally made her move. The call came in like a bad omen. Her name lit up my screen like it always did when she wanted something cloaked in just checking in. I stared at it for a long moment before answering, knowing full well that whatever this was, it wasn't going to be genuine. And I was right. Her voice was syrupy sweet, the way she always got when trying to pretend nothing had happened. She launched into a string of compliments so rehearsed they could have been lifted from a generic birthday card. How impressed she was, how proud the whole family was, how she always knew I had something special in me. Which felt particularly absurd coming from the woman who literally told me I wasn't a winner less than a week ago. But the part that stuck with me, etched itself into my spine like a cold shiver, was when she said, "You should have come to the party, Michelle. You would have been the star of the show." That line. That unbearable, infuriating line. Because it wasn't just a lie, it was a revision. She was rewriting the past in real time, as if the hurt she caused could be undone by pretending it never happened. As if I had excluded myself. As if I had been the one to stay home by choice and not the one who was left out by design. I let her speak, allowed the words to pile up like the fake hors d'oeuvres at Rachel's party, pretty, overdone, and empty. Then, when she finally paused, I said, very clearly and very calmly, "You didn't want me there. And now? You need me there." There was silence on the line, the kind that tastes like iron, and I could practically hear her trying to swallow her pride. But Linda doesn't apologize. She pivots. She recovers. So she said, "Well, that's why we're planning a little brunch. A sort of family celebration. Nothing big, just a chance for everyone to reconnect. We'd love to have you there. Sunday noon. My house." The invitation was not a peace offering. It was a strategic move. A PR reset. I could see it already, photos of us smiling on her patio, her arm around me, captions like "family first" and "proud auntie moments." She needed to launder her image, to cleanse the digital record of her having excluded the very person who now had the public spotlight. And I was her ticket to redemption. I told her I'd check my calendar, and then I hung up. But deep down, I already knew I'd go. Not for them. Not to play nice or patch things up. I'd go because I was done being invisible. Because sometimes the most satisfying kind of revenge isn't slamming the door, it's opening it just wide enough for them to see what they missed, and making them wonder if they'll ever be let fully back in. I wouldn't raise my voice. I wouldn't name names. I'd simply show up, say nothing loud, and let the truth hang in the air, unspoken and unbearable. Let them feel the absence of my silence. Let them squirm under the weight of their own denial. Let them try, just for once, to win me back. The invitation had all the markings of something casual and sweet on the surface: light fare, fresh coffee, maybe a fruit salad and scrambled eggs served with awkward smiles and paper napkins folded into polite triangles, but underneath that shiny veneer. Beneath the emails and cheerful phone calls and "looking forward to seeing you" texts, there was a simmering layer of performance, calculation, and unspoken tension so thick you could cut it with a butter knife. I had agreed to attend Linda's brunch not because I was in any way interested in reconnecting with the same people who had ghosted me at my lowest, or because I believed there was a sliver of honesty in their suddenly warm overtures, but because something inside me, something quiet, coiled, and tired of being ignored, wanted to see how far they'd go to pretend they'd always been on my side, and more importantly, how far I could let them walk into their own trap without lifting a finger to stop them. That morning, I didn't bother dressing for comfort or familiarity. I didn't go for one of those outfits that says, "See? I'm still the same girl you knew," because I wasn't. That girl had been starved of validation for so long she'd started believing maybe she didn't deserve any. Instead, I wore a steel gray blazer over a sleeveless top, hair pulled back into a low knot that said business more than family, with small gold studs and pointed heels that made every step sound like a gavel. There was no lipstick, no false warmth. I wasn't showing up to be pretty. I was showing up to be undeniable. Linda's house looked exactly the way I remembered it, too big for one couple, too perfect for comfort, and too manicured to be anything but a living, breathing shrine to image. Her front yard was lined with trimmed hedges that curved with unnecessary precision, and the porch had been freshly power-washed, as if this impromptu brunch had suddenly become an open house for public forgiveness. I walked in exactly at noon, not a minute early, not a second late, and the moment the door opened, I felt the air shift. Conversations paused. Faces turned. Smiles stretched too wide. Linda was the first to greet me, arms open like a grandmother in a Hallmark movie, voice high and syrupy as she said, "There she is. Our star," as if we had some long-running inside joke, as if she hadn't told me, with surgical clarity, that I wasn't a winner just a week prior. She kissed me on both cheeks, the kind of kiss that barely makes contact, and ushered me into the living room where everyone was already seated with mimosas in hand, pretending this was just another lovely Sunday morning between family. Rachel looked up from her phone with an expression that tried very hard to be natural but came off as staged, and she said something about how good I looked, which was interesting coming from someone who once told me at a Christmas party that I dressed like I was going to a startup funeral. My mother was there too, seated between two of Linda's book club friends like a guest at a wedding she wasn't sure she supported, but didn't want to miss in case it turned out to be important. The air was thick with too much perfume, overcompensating laughter, and the uncomfortable weight of forced goodwill. The first few minutes passed in a blur of small talk and strategically timed compliments, the kind of chatter meant to make everything feel natural even though it was clear no one had any idea what to say to me beyond some variation of "Wow, so proud of you," or "We always knew you had it in you," which, of course, was the most convenient lie of all. It was Rachel, of all people, who finally broke the pattern, clinking her glass with the edge of a fork like it was a wedding toast and saying, "I think it's amazing what you've done. We were just talking before you arrived about how we can all support you now that things are really taking off." That word, now, hung in the air like smoke. Not "we supported you," not "we always believed," but "now that you've made it." It was a confession disguised as encouragement, a thinly veiled admission that none of them had given a damn until CNN told them they should. Linda took the cue like a baton in a relay, smiling wide as she stood and said, "Actually, that's part of why we brought everyone together this morning. It's not just a brunch, it's a bit of a brainstorming session." Kyle, her son, the one who still lived at home and had changed college majors 3 times before landing on audio media and production, is launching a new podcast, and we thought, given your success and experience, maybe you'd be willing to mentor him, or even come on as a guest in one of the first episodes. You know, help him get the reach. There it was. The real reason. The true purpose of this little gathering masquerading as a brunch. Not a celebration, not a reunion, not even an apology dressed up in Chardonnay and brunch eggs. but a pitch, a request, a favor. Because now that I had a spotlight, everyone suddenly wanted to stand beside me in the glow. I let the silence stretch long enough to make people uncomfortable, long enough to let them hear their own words echo back at them, and then I smiled, tight, professional, polite, and said, of course. Happy to support. But I have an idea. Let's make it more interesting. What if we do a family panel? Something live-streamed, raw and honest. About ambition, expectations, what it means to be successful in a family like ours. The looks exchanged across that table were worth every second I had spent building Pulsepin in obscurity. Linda blinked, unsure if she had just been outmaneuvered or handed an even bigger opportunity, while Kyle nodded too eagerly, not yet realizing what a live conversation with me might actually expose. Rachel frowned slightly, calculating. And my mother shifted in her seat, uncomfortable with the idea of anything raw and honest being aired in front of strangers. But Linda, always the showman when the crowd was right, clapped her hands once and said, I love that. It'll be great. Real. A conversation people can relate to. I raised my glass, not in toast, but in silent agreement to a deal they didn't fully understand they had made. Because now, they had invited me back into the circle, and this time, I was the one drawing it. Not to hurt. Not to humiliate. But to hold up a mirror so they could finally see what I had always been. And maybe, just maybe, what they had always refused to become. The live stream was scheduled for Thursday evening at 7 prime time, peak engagement, right when people are winding down from their day jobs and scrolling their phones in search of distraction, validation, or some messy drama to latch onto, and the irony that Linda, who once told me I wasn't cut out for serious platforms, had agreed to put the entire family on a public broadcast, did not escape me. In the days leading up to it, I stayed quiet. I didn't coach anyone on what we'd talk about, didn't organize questions in advance, didn't prepare sound bites or media kits or even outline a structure, because the truth was, I didn't need to. The truth was already there, waiting under the surface, vibrating just beneath their practiced smiles and curated family personas, and all I had to do was let it speak. That night, I arrived 15 minutes early to Linda's house, not because I wanted to help set up or hover nervously over wires and camera angles, but because I wanted to watch them sweat, just a little, as they realized they'd handed me the microphone without asking what I planned to do with it. The living room had been converted into a faux studio, complete with ring lights, a folding table dressed up in a linen cloth, and a few chairs set in a semicircle like some daytime talk show produced on a retirement budget. Kyle had already posted a countdown on his podcast's brand new Instagram page, complete with the caption, Family, Failure, and Fortune, a real conversation with the Rayner legacy, as if this whole thing had been his idea all along. Linda buzzed around like a producer on the brink of a nervous breakdown, fussing over camera angles, testing lighting on her cheekbones, adjusting a throw pillow for symmetry, and loudly telling everyone to just be yourselves. I took my seat calmly, legs crossed, hands relaxed in my lap, and when Kyle gave the signal, I smiled into the camera, not the empty, frozen smile I used to offer at family holidays, but the deliberate, measured smile of someone who's finally comfortable being seen for who she is, regardless of how uncomfortable that makes everyone else feel. The broadcast began predictably enough. Kyle welcomed viewers, introduced the concept of the family panel, and asked us each to share something about our personal definition of success, a softball question intended to ease the audience in, but one that already started to cause visible discomfort as people scrambled to find answers that sounded both humble and impressive. Rachel spoke first, delivering a well-rehearsed summary of her real estate ventures, her philanthropy work, which was, in truth, mostly just writing checks for social media photos, and how she believed success was about balance, not just bank accounts. Linda followed with a monologue that veered dangerously close to a campaign speech, talking about hard work, tradition, and the importance of lifting others up, a sentiment that would have carried more weight had she not spent the better part of my adult life pushing me down under the pretense of tough love. When it was my turn, I paused, looked directly into the camera, and said, without flinching, success, to me, is building something real, something no one else believed in, while carrying the weight of every dismissal, every eye roll, every whisper that said you weren't enough. And doing it anyway. The air shifted. Cole tried to smile, but his face twitched slightly, and Linda coughed into her wine glass. I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. The silence did the rest. From there, the conversation wavered, sometimes circling safe territory, other times skimming dangerously close to confessions none of them were ready to make. Then Kyle, perhaps emboldened by his desire to appear bold or simply unaware of how deep he was wading, looked directly at me and asked, "So, Michelle, what kept you going all those years when no one really saw it?" He phrased it like a compliment, but his voice had that tinge of pity people slip in when they want credit for being reflective without ever actually accepting blame. I could have said a dozen things. I could have listed mentors, late nights, caffeine, and code. But instead, I said, slowly and deliberately, silence. Being ignored was the best motivator I ever had. Every time I was left out, it reminded me that I had something to prove. And when the world finally started listening, I realized I didn't need their validation anymore. I just needed to make sure they couldn't ignore me again. Rachel looked down at her phone. Linda pressed her lips together so tightly I thought they might disappear. My mother shifted uncomfortably in her seat, and for a long moment, no one said anything. The chat on the live stream, however, erupted. Viewers were commenting things like, "Damn, that's raw," and "This is not the family brunch I expected," and someone even wrote, "CEO just politely dragged the entire bloodline and I'm here for it." And then I did what I'd planned all along. I turned to Kyle, whose podcast aspirations now rested entirely on the back of this one live stream, and asked him a question with such casual precision that it sliced through the air like a scalpel. "So, Kyle," I said, voice even, "what's your vision? I mean, beyond piggybacking off other people's success." The silence that followed was pure oxygen. Kyle stammered. He tried to laugh, then said something about storytelling that matters, but the moment had passed. The audience had heard the hesitation, the shallow bravado, and more importantly, they'd seen the mask slip. The clip, of course, went viral. Not because I had planned it that way, but because real moments don't need polish to spread. Reddit picked it up first. Then Twitter. A headline began circulating, "Tech CEO shuts down entitled family on live podcast," and while the wording was more dramatic than the moment itself, the core of it rang true. People saw what I had seen for years, people who don't believe in you until the world forces them to. By midnight, I had 3 new offers for partnerships, 2 keynote speaking requests, and 1 carefully worded email from Linda that began with, "Perhaps we got off on the wrong foot," and ended with a request to discuss how we can present a more unified front moving forward. I didn't reply, but I did send a short email to Grandma, attaching the live stream link and writing only one sentence, "Thank you for always seeing me when no one else did." Her response came 10 minutes later. A photo of her, sitting in her living room, proudly holding a Pulsepin-branded coffee mug I hadn't even known we made. And that should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Because a few days later, sitting alone in my office, with the city buzzing outside and the glow of a billion-dollar valuation casting a warm, golden light over everything I'd built, I felt something unfamiliar creep in, not guilt, not regret exactly, but a soft, gnawing whisper of doubt. Had I done it for myself? Or had I, in some small, dark part of me, done it just to win? And if I had, what did that make me now? Because the line between proving people wrong and becoming the kind of person you once hated is thinner than anyone ever tells you. And sometimes, when the cameras go off and the applause fades, you're left alone with the question no one can answer for you. Are you still fighting to be seen? Or are you finally just someone else they're afraid to ignore?